everybody, it's Mike Jeffers, Chicago Jazz Magazine, ChicagoJazz.com, and welcome to another episode of Around Town. Today we've got two great guests. Our first guest is Geoff Bradfield. He's going to be playing at the Green Mill with a group called Tenor Time, and we're going to be talking all about that. That's coming up November 17th and 18th. And then in our second interview today on Around Town, we're going to be talking to Juli Wood, the great saxophonist. She's coming to Andy's on the 17th and 18th. So we've got dueling saxophonists here, and Geoff, congratulations on, first of all, this gig is going to be incredible, but also congratulations on the record label. So first, let's talk about Tenor Time and what people can expect to hear at the Green Mill and how this whole gig came about.
It'll be a lot of fun. We've always enjoyed these performances when we've had the chance to get together. This project came about originally through Richard Johnson, great piano player. And he had done a project, or maybe two projects, with three altos, recording projects for his Afar music label. And he wanted to do something with three tenors. So he and I talked about it and got John Wojciechowski and Scott Burns on board. And on the records, Greg Archery and Clark Summers. And we each contributed some music, and just one of those COVID-free-ish days, somewhere in between waves, we did a recording session in Richard's basement. He has a nice studio set up down there, and had it out pretty shortly after that. And I've done a few gigs around town, a couple things out of town since that with it. And for me, it's tremendously fun to be on stage with two other saxophone players, two other tenor players who I admire to no end. I mean, I think some of the greatest saxophone players in the world, John Wojciechowski and Scott Burns. It's such a great experience because, for 2/3 of the gig, I'm just listening to those guys. And my job's very easy. At the Mill, Scott Burns is unable to make it. He has another commitment. So John Rabagon will be filling in, so that'll be a lot of fun. And Neil Hemphill will be filling in for Greg Archery. So likewise, we'll have a great band at the Mill.
Did you guys ever do an actual release show for this group? Because, I mean, it could be a pseudo release kind of thing, right?
We were actually thinking of this as like, well, we'll go play some new music at the Mill. We're going to play some old music too, but we're going to play a couple new things. And then we're about due to make another record after that. So I think next year sometime you can look for a new Tenor Time record out. We did do a release show at the Showcase last January when this originally happened, and have been sporadically around town since then. Did something in Cincinnati, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's like a superstar band that's going to be there at the Mill. So, I mean, that's something that everybody should go check out. Of course, the Green Mill's at 4802 North Broadway in Chicago. As the great Dave Gemolo always says, all roads lead to Uptown. And it's greenmilljazz.com. And at 8 p.m. to midnight, I'm assuming, the standard sets on Friday and Saturday. So it's going to be super swinging. Everybody can go visit Geoff at geoffbradfield.com. Now, let's talk about this record label you have too, Caligram Records. Mm-hmm. Would you start it last year, I think? Is that when you kind of launched it?
We started talking about, Chad McCullough and I are partners in this, and we started talking about it late last year and decided, well, we'd push the actual launch to this year just for ease of tax purposes and all that stuff, just to put it in a single calendar year. And so around January, we started doing all the stuff you do to put a company together, opening a bank account together and filing for the LLC and all that boring stuff, which you're intimately familiar with as an independent business person. And also, of course, thinking about what we wanted to do with this, because there were many possible variations. For me, the initial impetus was really just to have complete control over how and when my own releases were coming out, and not to go through a third party for this, because no matter how well-meaning that third party is, they are not going to love your children as much as you love your children. And they have some other children to take care of too, most of the time. So, I just wanted to have a little bit more control over, especially timing of releases and what they look like, all of the presentation aspects of it. And Chad's a great graphic designer, does work on that front for many people in town, for other record labels, have worked for Origin Records for years. And so, as we talked about it, he convinced me, he's like, instead of just putting our records out, we should see, what about getting some other people on board, some other people who are like-minded and might be looking for an avenue to release their recording in a similar way. you know, and that really fell into our laps in a nice way in the first batch of releases because my former student, young tenor player in town, Armand Singeling, had a record come out on the label because he was a Jazz Links fellow at the time and was working with Matt Juli and Dave Miller and Devin Dropka on this recording. And then Russ Johnson approached me and says, "Hey, what about putting my record on your?" Which was that was really a fantastic piece of luck for us timing wise.
Yeah.
Russ's record is fantastic with Tim Daisy, Mark Feldman, Ethan Fillion is getting a lot of attention, and again, he's one of my favorite musicians in town. He's on my recording as well. And so yeah, those came out. We had a nice little article in Downbeat on them. People have been very receptive and supportive. Great feedback from folks in town like Howard Mandel and Neil Tesser and other writers and journalists. The folks at DCB have been fantastic. So yeah, it's really been an interesting experience. I mean, it's a lot of work, right? So while Chad's doing the design and he's doing the a lot of the online stuff in terms of distribution to digital platforms, I'm doing the press stuff, like putting together mailing lists for radio and journalists and making sure everybody gets CDs or download codes or whatever they might like, and writing the press releases and talking to the artists and helping them put together their press release. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I've written 8 press releases in the last couple months.
And that's not and from somebody who's been writing press releases for like 20 plus years, that is not like sit down 10 minutes later, you got a press release done. It is a taxing situation. And a lot of people, it's kind of interesting that and I want to have you back on the show because later on this, probably early next year, I'm going to start a show that's focused around entrepreneurial music stuff. And you and I are going to talk about all this stuff because then we can get way in the weeds because I want to go way in the weeds now, but I'm trying not to. But
no, I hear you. And I should mention the other records that just came out on the label too, rather than going in the weeds about that. I should say those 4 records came out in August, and then we just released our last 4 for the year in another batch this last Friday. And that includes Scott Hesse's new trio record, which is fantastic. Him and Dana Hall and Clark Summers in a live recording at King Christensen's room, Pro Musica. And another recording featuring Russ Johnson with led by Dave Bayless, great Milwaukee drummer, in a trio format, live at the Uptowner, which is the oldest functioning bar in Milwaukee. If you want a real piece of Milwaukee culture, you've got to go up there and hang out at the Uptowner. It's a scene, and the music sounds like it was recorded in a scene. And then there's a great record from Steve Million featuring the violinist Mark Feldman. Beautiful writing in a kind of chamber music vein. And another record with Chad, this one more of a collaboration with musicians from Scotland and the Netherlands, called Atlantic Road Trip. And that band was just on the road for 3 weeks and had a great U.S. Midwest, I think actually all the way out to the West Coast too, tour.
Yeah, and the Steve Million, he did that at the Chicago Jazz Fest. So, you know, for those of you that saw him at the Jazz Fest, now you can pick up a recording of that performance as well, or of that group, I should say.
That group, yeah, they did it in the Transient Sound in Vijay Studio.
Yep. Okay. So I'll send everybody over. We got calligramrecords.com, I believe, correct? And then we've got geoffbradfield.com. And of course, go see Geoff live and in person November 17th and 18th at the Green Mill, Friday and Saturday nights. Of course, that's 4802 North Broadway. Everybody knows where the Green Mill is, greenmilljazz.com. Geoff, thanks for jumping on, man. Congratulations. And I know you're busy running a business.
Yeah, you know what it's like.
I know exactly what it's like. You're not sitting around playing saxophone all day anymore, are you?
No, sadly not. But it's great. I'm enjoying it. Yeah,
it is. It's fun, and I really appreciate the fact that you're giving back and you're actually helping other people get their music out to hear, for other people to hear, because it wouldn't be released most likely on different labels unless you had this label on some of this stuff. So congratulations on the whole thing, and I look forward to talking to you in depth about how to set up a record label in 2024 and all the good stuff about being in business as a musician.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody for watching. As I always say, all the information is at chicagojazz.com. And until next time, hopefully I will see somebody out on the scene. We are back, of course, on this episode. I just talked with the great Geoff Bradfield. And as I said, we've got two saxophonists on this show. The great Juli Wood is joining me now. She's got a show coming up November 17th and 18th, the late night set over at Andy's Jazz Club, of course, 11 East Hubbard Street in Chicago, 10:30 p.m. to 11:45 p.m. And she's doing her group Chicago Calling. And we're going to talk a little bit about this because it's got a long history in Chicago. And the thing I love about this group, and Julie's the perfect person to do this, is it pays tribute to a lot of the musicians that came through Chicago, Herbie Hancock, people like that, but also Jody Christian, Irma Thompson, people that maybe some people might not recognize, but she was lucky enough to play with, and she's keeping their memory and their honor alive. So, Juli, welcome to the show. It is great to see you, even if it's only virtual.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, for sure. So let's talk about this. November 17th and 18th, when I saw this on the calendar, I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit so we could preview it and get the word out about this. It's the late night set over at Andy's. Of course, Fariz Whitted is playing before you, so that's a great, incredible musician playing ahead of you. But at 10:30 p.m., you guys take the stage and talk a little bit about this Chicago Calling. How did this group come about? Because it's been in existence for quite a while.
Yeah, well, I had an idea several years ago. Boy, I don't even know if it was 8 years ago or what. Time is flying by.
Well, then we missed a couple of years during the pandemic. So
yeah, right. But I thought it would be great to honor all the great people, especially tenor saxophonists who came out of Chicago, and a lot of them went to DuSable High School.
Right.
So so I put a group together. Abriel Ra was on the drums, and Harrison Bankhead was on bass, and Leandro Verdi was Lopez Verdi was on the piano, and we were just playing music of Johnny Griffin and Sun Ra, because John Gilmore was in Sun Ra's band, and Johnny Griffin, Clifford Jordan, and we even did, what else? Then I was singing some things like something Dinah Washington would sing, or Joe Williams, Johnny Hartman. I mean, there's just so many greats who came. Gene Ammons. Eddie Harris. So we were doing some really fun music, and that went a couple of years. We went over to Poland with the Made in Chicago festival that they always had there, and but then we took some years off. I know Harrison wasn't feeling too good towards the end there, and so then the group reconfigured when Mike Schlick was thinking of putting some other musicians together for his gig over at Buddy Guy's, and that's when we formed with Mike on the drums, and Mike Alamana on guitar, and then Matt Ferguson on the bass. So we've been a quartet like that for a couple of years now, and we're so grateful to Andy's for giving us this third weekend of every month. So the whole year we've been really having fun with this music and adding tunes like for Vaughn Freeman, a tune by him called Portrait of John Young, because of course Matt and Mike Alamana had played with him for years down at the New Apartment Lounge. So we had to add that, something by Vaughn. And so we've just been enjoying our residency there at Andy's, and excited also to play some other venues. We're going to do Hey Nani, and So,
well, you get all over the place with this group. Obviously, you play in a ton of different groups too, and you lead different groups. And I mean, you're constantly busy. Plus, you're teaching. You're at the Music Institute of Chicago, I think, still, right?
Right.
They're at North Shore Music, so you're constantly staying busy. But this kind of a group, just to be able to, I mean, you've got an hour. What is it? About an hour and 45 or something like that you're playing, and it's like, I don't even know how you pick the tunes to play, because you could, as you just mentioned, you rattled off, like 20 musicians right there, and I mean, it's like I don't even know how you thin down the repertoire to do that, but I love the fact that you're keeping the memory of all these artists alive, because, as I was coming up, similar to you, a lot of them were still around. I mean, they might've been older, but they were coming through town, and they were back in town, and they were playing regularly. But now with this new generation, a lot of people might not have any idea who Von Freeman was and how much he gave back to the music scene in Chicago and brought the national
Right.
spotlight on it, or Gene Ammons, or
Yeah.
Lee Christian, or any of these people. I mean,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about some of those past influences that you have, that you're also obviously performing some of their music. But I mean, was there like a one or two musicians that really kind of, when you came into town, kind of took you under their wing, or really inspired you when you saw them play, that helped you turn your playing into a career?
Yeah, I mean, I was so lucky to be mentored really by Irma Thompson, great piano player, and also Jody Christian. We do one of Jody's tunes called Jeremy. It's written about one of his grandsons. So we're happy to play his music. And Irma always told me stories about how she almost went on the road with Billie Holiday. And so sometimes we do a ballad, Violets for My Furs, that Billie Holiday sang, but also it's tied to Von Freeman because Mike Alamana told me that was one of Von's favorite ballads to play. Yeah, so we try to keep that alive. And yeah, I was mentored back in Milwaukee when I lived there, the great organ player Melvin Rhine. So I've been really lucky to have these elders kind of, teaching me and encouraging me. That's really important. Yeah.
Well, and on November 17th and 18th, so 10:30 p.m., 11:45 p.m., and as Julie mentioned, it's the third weekend of every month throughout the rest of this year, and I'm sure they're going to keep things going into 2024 on some level as well. Andy's is doing such a great job because they came back after the pandemic. They do a live stream still, so you can check that out online as well. But also they've got the early sets, which starts at 6 o'clock and goes till 9:30, and then the 10:45 until 11:45 kicks off, and or 10